Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Councilman Jim Waring. Joining me on today's show is Assistant City Manager of Phoenix, Lori Bays. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the first time you've been on, so an oversight on my part. We'll blame COVID, but pleased to have you here. You were Human Resources Director for years and then moved up to the #2 position at the city a year or so ago, and we're excited about that. But you had an interesting career before you came here with a lot of responsibilities. You want to just talk about that for a few minutes?
Sure, yeah. Before I came to the city of Phoenix, I was actually in Salt Lake County up in Utah, and I was the Chief Administrative Officer, there for a couple of years. And before that, I was in sort of a Deputy City Manager-like role, overseeing human services at the time. And so that's really my background, is human services. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, which comes in very handy.
I don't think I knew that, but probably dealing with the council members, I include myself in that. That probably is very helpful.
And I've really enjoyed working with people throughout my career. That's really been my passion and has led me into public service administration. And I love leading teams, and the opportunity here working in human resources was fantastic because I got to know every part of the city. And I think that's really what has made me a successful assistant city manager, hopefully successful assistant city manager.
You're successful, city.
And I've really enjoyed getting to work with all of those departments in a different capacity.
Yeah. So it's a big responsibility. We have 15,000 employees, somewhere in there. It's a lot of folks, fewer than it was before the Great Recession, so we're relying more on technology and trying to be more efficient, but it's still a big production. You got the pensions, you got the healthcare costs, you got to put it all together. You're doing the negotiations with the union. I know that's not your primary focus now, or certainly your only focus, but you want to talk a little bit about what that was like and what the budget was and how much stuff you had to go through to make all that work?
Yeah, so human resources is an interesting function. It's a role that is citywide, but there are also department-specific teams, and so you're really working with different groups of people in different functions across the city. Negotiations is a big part of that, and that really impacts every department across the city because we have represented groups in every department, and we have different levels of employees who are represented by different labor groups, and so we have to work with each one of them in order to come up with a successful agreement that's going to move us forward into the next contract period. And that's no small feat because we're working with 7 different groups, and we're working across
who want different things.
Yeah. And we're working across priorities for all of those different groups, but we have city priorities that we also need to have in place, and a lot of that has to do with the budget, has to do with what we can afford to put into a contract, what types of work rules we can agree to, and consistency is often a factor there in trying to be consistent across labor groups. So it is a challenge to navigate all of that, but we have great partners in our labor organizations that we work with, and they have been really fantastic to work with over the years, and very, I think, intentional about what they want in representing their employees, but also understanding of what it takes to manage a city and what it really means to have things that are good for the city as a whole.
Well, before your time, there were always struggles with the projections of how much money we would actually have to pay for all this, and if you don't have enough money, that certainly can impact the quality of life here. But really, since about your time, the projections from the budget department have been spot on, so that's certainly been helpful. Know how much money do you have to actually spend. But realistically, you've seen a lot of changes over time. There's been a lot of talk about the pension, particularly. You want to talk a little bit about the pension systems that Phoenix pays into and how that works? Because that's in the news a lot. Not as much here recently, but it's still a concern for us here on the council.
Sure, yeah. The pension systems are important. They are liabilities that we have as a city and requirements that we have to pay into those pension programs, and the costs for those continue to go up. And so,
and there's no cutting it. I mean, I think that's an important thing. So people understand these are contracts. Once the person's in, you're really taking on potentially a 70 or 80 year obligation.
Correct.
So we can't go back and change it.
Mm-hmm. And we have to meet that obligation. It is a requirement, and it, again, not optional. So we have to take that very seriously and that responsibility very seriously. It's also an important thing to help our employees understand, because that has to be factored into what they're looking at as they're coming into the organization, because they pay into the pension plan also, all of our employees do. And so, they have to pay their part, we pay our part, and they also need to understand the value of what they're getting for that at the end of their career is really significant in comparison to what you might get in the private sector these days.
Yeah, so it is something that needs to get factored in, but I was, believe it or not, 22 once too. It's hard if you're just starting your career to really, at whatever level and whatever job at the city, it is hard to sometimes see 30, 40 years down the road and how this might impact you. So we have been struggling to hire in a whole host of areas. There's no maybe one explanation. We're not the only major employer who's having this problem. We're not the only city or government agency that's having this problem, but it is a problem. You want to talk about how we're trying to address it with some of the pay things we've done here in the last 10 months or so?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we've really focused heavily on improving our marketability as an employer, if you will, looking at what we pay employees and then also what we offer as benefits. So we've done several things, the biggest of which is the council just approved, thank you very much, the classification and compensation study implementation. So over the last 2 years, we've been working with a consultant to look at all of our job classifications across the city. And we have almost 900, so that is no small task. And the consultant came back with some data, we made some recommendations to the council, and now we can say that we are a market leader in all of our job classifications, which is fantastic for us to go out and try and hire employees. And we're already seeing the benefits of that. We're seeing more job applications come in, and hopefully that's going to lead us to hiring more high quality employees to provide city services. So that's been fantastic. We've also had some really good contracts that were negotiated, as we were just talking about, through labor negotiations.
Never seen it go smoother.
This
is the first time where I really don't think I heard any complaints from either side.
Well, it really, in all fairness, is a fantastic package for employees. We've been able to catch up from being a little bit behind the market through the recession and following over the last decade or so. And so this was a catch-up period for us. And now with the classification and compensation study, we're really able to keep on track and stay ahead of the market, which is going to put us in a great position to be the premier employer that we want to be. Some of the other things that we're doing are offering some benefits for employees that they really value. For example, we have launched a parental leave program, which has been really valuable for some of our, I would say, younger employees who are starting families and really, don't have a lot of vacation time saved up, and they really benefit from being able to have that parental leave benefit to take time off, to bond with a new child. It could be a child that's born into their family, or it could be an adopted child or a foster child. And so there's an opportunity for folks to really have that benefit that they can utilize even when they're new in their career. And that's been a struggle for some of our employees over time, and they've had to take time off without pay and those kinds of things, and this really eliminates that.
Well, it is probably strange for people to hear me say this in this context, but this is sort of what the market expects. Mm-hmm. It is a market-driven thing. We're not, in most of these cases, we're not inventing this stuff. This is something our competitors, and we do have them, whether it's other cities or the private sector, to get employees, and we are struggling in a lot of areas. A lot of the things the city does, whether it's fixing roads, cleaning the sides of the streets. Obviously, people recognize police and fire or taking care of the parks. Those are physically demanding jobs, and people do have alternatives. Whether,
Absolutely.
Again, it'd be other cities, so that's really the class and comp study sort of focused on us paying at least as well or better than other cities and making sure the benefits like you're talking about are commensurate with what the jobs are, but also what everybody else is doing, because otherwise you're not going to have any employees. We did start with police. I think that was last August, if I remember it correctly. And so we've got a little bit of feedback about how the pay raise that we gave them is being received. It seems like it's generating more applicants. But you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our police department, as have many police departments across the country, have struggled with hiring. Our numbers have been down. And
a relatively recent phenomenon.
Over the last several years, since about 2020. And so we have tried to implement different things to improve that situation. We've focused on improving pay for people coming into the organization, as well as our existing officers and all folks throughout the sworn ranks, really. And we've also addressed retention by providing a retention incentive for our sworn officers as well, to ensure that they understand that they're valued members of our employee population, valued members of our community, and we want to make sure that we're addressing them as well and not just new employees coming into the organization. We have a fantastic police department. They do incredible work every day. I think, some of the negative press that our department gets overshadows the wonderful work that they do on a day in, day out basis. I've been out to visit every single precinct over this last year and all of the different bureaus within the police department, and it's been so inspiring to visit our employees and to talk with them, to see the work that they do. I mean, for example, our special assignments unit, our crime lab, they do things that are just amazing, and they do it on a day-to-day basis, and so they don't think it's amazing, they think it's just what they do. But when you go and actually see what they do, it's remarkable, and they're keeping our community safe. They're helping to prosecute crimes that happen, to make sure that victims get the justice they deserve. They are doing the work that our community expects, and they do it without expecting to be thanked. They're amazing people, and so I just want to give them the credit that's due. Doesn't mean we don't have work to do in the police department. We're constantly looking at making sure that our policies are, reflecting the best practices in policing. We're trying to make sure that we have the best training, the best equipment, some of the less lethal tools that we've rolled out over this last year and are continuing to roll out this year are making a huge difference. They're saving lives. They're giving our officers tools to get a situation under control in a better way than using lethal force. And some of those things that we do are really important. And so highlighting those things to prospective officers is really important too, because they need to understand this is what you're going to have to work with when you're here. This is the type of training you're going to get. These are the colleagues that you're going to have that are really, the best in class of police officers. That's important for people who are looking at a career in law enforcement. Do you want to work in a small town where you may get a very limited amount of experience, or do you want to come work for Phoenix, the 5th largest city in the country, with all of these different opportunities and an ability to really make a difference in the community, to work with a very diverse community, and to be a part of something really important and really powerful?
Well, you talked about the veterans on the force too. A lot of them are retirement eligible, so taking care of them, giving them an incentive to stay apart from love of the job and duty, I thought was really important. So I'm glad that you singled that out. And obviously attracting the new recruits. I think the new recruits to the Phoenix Police Department are the highest paid in Arizona now, and so that's obviously important if you're a younger person in your 20s, where a lot of the recruits tend to be age-wise. An extra $5,000 or $10,000 is a huge deal. It is for everybody, but particularly at that age, and it makes it a more attractive job at a time when it's been hard since 2020 and the riots and everything. It's been hard for us to hire. You were integral in the hiring of Chief Sullivan to bring him here to be the chief of police. I want to talk a little bit about that process and what that was like, and sort of, I'm curious myself, like, who else was interested, maybe not named specifically, but how much interest was there in coming to Phoenix?
Sure. So that was a really interesting process. It's a little bit like trying to find a unicorn, if you ask me. We're looking for things that are hard to find in one package. So we were looking for someone who really has a love of law enforcement, would really support the department, and would be able to look at things through a fresh lens and look at things through those best practice eyes I was talking about, looking at our policies and being able to say, hey, we do a lot of things really well, but there's an area here where we can improve, and to move that forward. We are working with the Department of Justice right now and through an investigation process, and we needed someone who had that level of expertise. That's also not something that's easy to find, out in the marketplace.
It's like you're looking for an NFL quarterback who's going to be
Exactly.
really successful. If it was that easy, all the teams would do it,
Right.
and it's clearly not that easy. And that's what it reminded me of. You're looking for a person who's got a lot of different skills that, while they're not mutually exclusive, it's hard to find one person who has them all, and experience as well.
Absolutely. And I think we were really fortunate in finding Chief Sullivan. There were some other folks who were interested, and we really had folks identified through talking to the experts. We talked to some of the law enforcement experts in the field who are police reform experts, who are looking at who are the cities who have successfully come through DOJ investigations or who are in that process and who's doing well, and kind of looking at those different aspects of what we were looking for, and then identifying folks who might want to talk to us about it. And it wasn't more than a handful of people, I'll tell you that. There really weren't that many unicorns out there to choose from.
I think the folks at home would be surprised, because I've gone through this process before where it was modeled somewhat differently using search firms and stuff, and you would think you'd get an awful lot of good quality candidates, and nothing against people who applied in the past, but it was kind of surprising that half the candidates, were maybe sergeants in smaller departments. I mean, that's not a realistic experience level to be chief of police in the 5th largest city in the country. It was kind of an eye-opener for me, and it sounds like this wasn't that different. There were a few very serious people who were really wanted the job and probably could do it under the right circumstances. But it wasn't a ton of people, and I don't know if that's a reflection on us somehow, or it's just the way these searches go. But that was an interesting thing to sort of process for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's just a small pool of candidates who have that big city experience and who have all of the qualities that we're looking for in a leader. And so I don't think that's a bad thing that it's a small pool. I think it's just a matter of, really finding that right person. And I think, for this interim period, we've been very fortunate to have Chief Sullivan on board. He's been able to come in. He's been in big cities. He understands how big city police departments work, and he also understands, what it takes to successfully move through a Department of Justice investigation. And so I think that's what we're doing. And we'll see where things go as we get to the point in time when we are able to start that search for a permanent chief. He has the opportunity to put his name in as an applicant for that process, and then we'll see who else is out there. That will be a very public process. We're going to have a lot of community involvement in selecting the permanent chief for the department, and we hope to identify the right person.
Yeah, and the last time I went through that in a public setting, when Jerry Williams got the job, and I believe it was 2016, I remember the community meeting that was at City Hall. I mean, it was packed, every bit as much as some of the more controversial meetings we've had about, pick something, the Sun Stadium or what have you. It was people basically rafter to rafter. So, it's a good problem to have if you have more qualified candidates, or many qualified candidates, I should say, coming forward. But we'll just see how that process plays out. You've also had something that Phoenix has less experience with, not necessarily even you personally, but just in general, hiring a fire chief, because we haven't had that many in the last 40 or so years. It's kind of like city managers. We're not like other cities. We don't churn through fire chiefs and city managers here in Phoenix. So you also were right in the middle of that process. You want to talk about that and how that's different? Because it is a different process, really, in terms of the scrutiny and what people are expecting.
Yeah, it really is. It's a different world, looking at a fire chief versus a police chief. And we were very fortunate to have several really qualified candidates internally that applied, as well as some external candidates. There was a great pool. We had a fantastic panel that assisted us, both internal folks as well as some experts in the fire service who were able to assist us in identifying the new chief. Chief Duran has just been, fantastic growing up through the ranks of the fire department. He has a passion for fire service, and he just really stood out as the right person to lead the fire department forward at this point in time. But I'm really proud that there were several really great internal candidates that, we had a hard decision to make when it came down to it. Chief Duran is the right chief, and he is doing a fantastic job, but we have such a great department and so many people who are growing up through the ranks, and I look forward to a great future for our fire department because we have so many wonderful leaders in that group.
Well, it was great to see so many. That was a very competitive process, and to see A lot of people had different opinions and so forth, but like you talked about the internal candidates, someday Chief Duran might retire, and when he does, it's nice that there's a possibility that some of those folks might still be available and interested. But it was a very good problem to have it be such a
Definitely.
tough decision. That really, I thought, spoke well of the department and the applicants involved. It also speaks, though, you went external for the police chief and you went internal for the fire chief, and I can see it both ways. The external person has to come in, they have to learn all the names, they have to learn, it's a cliche, but where the bathrooms are, and it is a far-flung empire. We're a very physically big city. You talked about visiting all the precincts. They got to do all that stuff, learn the personnel, learn people's strengths and weaknesses, learn the trouble spots. The internal candidate arguably could be known too well, potentially. People have formed their opinion about what the new chief is like. So you kind of split the difference and went one direction in one and one in the other. But I don't envy you those tasks because it is a hard decision and you just don't know how it's going to go. But in both cases, it seems like it's working really well so far. And so really, we're just hoping to stay the course.
Absolutely.
But you want to talk about your responsibilities? I mean, we have a huge budget. We had Jeff Barton in a few months ago. We've had both the chiefs and some other folks who run departments, but you're over really all of that. You interact a lot with the council and so forth, but you want to talk about, like, what does a day in the life of Lori Bays look like?
Sure. Well, my daughter asked me one time, what do you do? And I said, well, I go to a lot of meetings. But no, in all seriousness, I get a chance to kind of dabble in a lot of things throughout the day. I have meetings with different departments. I have meetings with council members, as you alluded to. I have meetings with community members about a variety of different issues. And it's funny because I deal with very, large scale things and things from a 30,000-foot viewpoint. And then I also get into the weeds sometimes when, perhaps a constituent hasn't been able to resolve an issue, and I get involved to, help them solve something, whatever that might be, whether it's a planning issue or a neighborhood services issue, or it's just something simple that, for whatever reason didn't get solved. And so my job is to help. I'm a problem solver, really, at the end of the day. My job is to help figure it out. And 9 times out of 10, if not more, it can be figured out. It's just a matter of how do we get there. So that's really how I look at my day-to-day, is just, kind of solving problems and talking to folks and making sure things are running smoothly. I really try to empower my teams to do the work that they do. They're the subject matter experts. I'm not here to get into the nitty-gritty unless I really have to, but to provide that direction and to really, keep people on track and following the strategic vision of the city manager, the policy direction of the council and the mayor, and just, making sure that we're staying on track and focusing on the priorities of the city.
Well, people have watched this show before, and we'll talk about the organizational structure in a second, but really the council just hires 2 people, the city manager and the chief judge. So sometimes people are surprised that we're not sitting around figuring out who the next police chief is going to be. We're sort of like a board of directors who then hires a CEO, and then would you be the chief operating officer in that setup?
More or less, yeah.
I'd say it's a fair. That was the
fair
analogy, but I figured you'd know better than me. You have to do it every day. But you want to talk a little bit about how the organization is laid out, and you talked about what your day is like, but like the responsibilities, how they sort of devolve isn't necessarily the most positive word, but they flow down from Jeff.
Yeah. So so Jeff obviously is the CEO of our organization. He's the lead from an operational perspective. I'm in the number 2 seat, and then we have several deputy city managers who work to manage the department. So there are some departments that I manage directly: police, fire, and HR, as well as our Office of Public Health. But then we have, all of the rest of the departments who report up through deputy city managers.
So parks as a department, streets, just so people know that what
Absolutely,
we're talking about.
Parks,
trash,
streets, planning and development. Yeah, all of the different city functions that they would interact with, the water department, all of those departments report up through deputy city managers. And it's okay if folks in our community don't know what the different departments are, because I always tell our teams, our job is to make it seamless for our community. All they need to know is we're part of the city. They don't need to figure out which department they need to go to or which
There's no test at the end of this
function.
show. Folks walking at home, I just want to make sure everybody
Right.
understands we're not expecting you to know every department.
Yeah, so it's really important for folks to understand we're all part of the same team, and we should be making it easy for our community, for our constituents to be able to navigate whatever service they need from us.
Yeah, and what one department's doing can reflect on the other departments. If we never pick up the trash, people are going to notice that, and that's going to sort of spill over on how they feel about the water department, et cetera. So the departments that you manage, police and fire particularly, how much of the city budget is that?
Well, it's a pretty big chunk of it. So probably, I guess about half. So the police department itself is almost $1 billion. It's about $900 million going into this next year. The fire department budget is about $500 million. And so you add those two together, that's about half of our $3.4 billion budget. So they're also about half of our employee population as well. So we've got about 4,000 employees in our police department and a little over 2,000 in our fire department. So it's a large group of people, a lot of money that is being managed, mostly for those personnel costs. But yes, it's a big
We're a
big
very
portion.
personnel-driven big business, basically. We own trucks and we own water pipes and we own a lot of stuff, property. But a lot of our budget goes for personnel and keeping them out in the field. It's very expensive to put a police officer or a firefighter out in the field fighting fires or fighting crime. It's not easy to replace them when they're gone. That's also very expensive, so we like to retain the ones that we have, providing they're doing a good job. But then we also have things like the airport, and you mentioned before the water department. You want to talk a little bit about how they interact and how you oversee them, because unless I didn't know, and I didn't know about your degree in psychology, so there may be other things I don't know, but you're not a pilot, you're not
I am not a pilot.
You're not a pilot, you don't never run an airport for a living, but eventually, the folks who do, kind of have to explain to you what they're doing and why, so you can explain it to Jeff and members of the council.
Right, so the airport is part of the aviation department, which again reports to a deputy city manager and then up, through the chain. We have a very well-run airport. Sky Harbor is one of the best airports in the country. I would say they're the best airport in the country.
I'll second
that. They are managed by a fantastic group of people. Our aviation director, Chad Makowski, is another true unicorn, somebody who has a lot of big city experience. He was here, he was in Dallas, and he came back fortunately to be our aviation director, and he manages a fantastic team. Everyone who works for the aviation department is so incredibly proud of the work that they do. Just ask any of them. They love their jobs and they do a fantastic job. And so what I like to say is, we need to, when we have departments like that who are doing great, they're the subject matter experts, they need to be able to shine and run with the ball. And really the issue is just making sure that we're communicating, that we know what's happening. They communicate to us, we communicate to them. Here's the bigger picture issues you need to be aware of. And when that's functioning well, and it is, then that's how we have a great relationship. And then they do their thing, and they run the best airport in the country.
Well, part of the reason I asked the question the way I did is just to put it in frame of reference for people. If you were at a neighborhood barbecue and you asked the person you were talking to who's waiting for his burger, what do you do for a living? Well, I run an airport. I don't know if it was me. I'd be like, wow, that sounds like a big task. Oh, I'm the police chief. Oh, well, that's a big task. Fire chief. And those people all report to you. And so it just gives a frame of reference that you have a lot of responsibilities, and we are very grateful. We did know when we hired Jeff Barton that his plan was to make you the number 2. I was personally very excited about that because we had worked together quite a bit, and I was always really just, you exude a quiet confidence that really made me feel good. I always felt like she really, I don't know, maybe she's kidding me, but she seems like she really knows what she's talking about. And I never saw anything that told me that wasn't true. So I've been very happy with the way things have played out, and very happy for you personally being in that position. But citizens who are watching this should, hopefully they have more now after seeing this and learning more about you, should have every confidence that the city at least in your area of expertise, is well run. So that's all, unfortunately, the time we have. It's flew by, but appreciate very much, Lori, you being on the show. And if you have any questions or comments, please call my office at 602-262-7445 or visit my website at Phoenix.gov/District 2. We look forward to seeing you next time on The Issues.